All right, ladies, we are on Psalm 77. In the day of trouble, I seek the Lord. To the choir master, according to Jeduthun, a psalm of Asaph. If my connection gets weak, you guys just carry on. I will come back eventually. Um, Kathy, what do you have? You're muted, Kathy.
We are comforted through the hard times by remembering God's help in the past. Recalling God's miracles and previous works can give us courage to continue.
My Bible has a little side note. It says our help in ages past. This is one psalm, but it reads like two distinct chapters. In the first 9 verses, the author bared his soul. He cried out for help, but remained uncomforted. The difficulties he faced kept his eyes open at night and his mouth shut during the day. In the midst of trouble, he asked the honest questions many in this broken world ask. Does God still love me? Are God's promises still true? This is the first chapter of this psalm. Then the psalmist remembered something else, namely the character of God he cried out to. In this second chapter, quote unquote, he meditated upon the deeds of his God. In 10 to 12, the character of his God in verse 13, the power of his God in 14 to 20. Long before the psalmist's suffering, the people of God were in bondage to Egypt. In Egypt, God heard their cry, redeeming them with a mighty arm. In the midst of trouble, the psalmist's only hope was the character of his God. Jesus instructed his disciples along the same lines in John 14, though he never promised them a life of ease. He encouraged them to believe in the midst of trouble. Their only hope, too, was the character of the God who spoke to them. This Jesus, God incarnate, heard their cries and put his power on display by redeeming them. Cindy, are you up to reading John MacArthur?
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't read the psalm yet, Chrissy.
Oh, we do have to read the psalm. Thank you, Lori.
You're
Kim, are
welcome.
you up to reading the psalm?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
I just want to start with this footnote because it gives a little insight. 1 through 12. Asaph cried out to God for courage during a time of deep distress. His plea was, I need help. But in 13 through 20, the I is gone. As Asaph expressed his request to God, his focus changed from thinking of himself to worshiping God.
Oh, I
You,
is
yeah,
gone.
and it says, You are the God of miracles and wonders, is that verse in 14. As we pray to God, he lifts us from looking at ourselves to looking at him. And I just never thought of that.
I like that.
I did too. All right, 77. I cry to the Lord. I call and call to him. Oh, that he would listen. I am in deep trouble and I need his help so much. All night long I pray, lifting my hands to heaven, pleading. There can be no joy for me until he acts. I think of God and moan, overwhelmed with longing for his help. I cannot sleep until you act. I am too distressed even to pray. 5. I keep thinking of the good old days of the past, long since ended. Then my nights were filled with joyous songs. I search my soul and meditate upon the difference now. Has the Lord rejected me forever? Will he never again be favorable? Is his loving kindness gone forever? Has his promise failed? Has he forgotten to be kind to one so undeserving? Has he slammed the door in anger on his love? And I said, This is my fate, that the blessings of God have changed to hate. I recall the many miracles he did for me so long ago. Those wonderful deeds are constantly in my thoughts. I cannot stop thinking about them. 13. O God, your ways are holy. Where is there any other as mighty as you? You are the God of miracles and wonders. You still demonstrate your awesome power. You have redeemed us who are the sons of Jacob and Joseph by your might. When the Red Sea saw you, how it feared. It trembled to its depths. The clouds poured down their rain. The thunder rolled and crackled in the sky. Your lightning flashed. There was thunder in the whirlwind. The lightning lighted up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your road led by a pathway through the sea, a pathway no one knew was there. You led your people along that road like a flock of sheep, with Moses and Aaron as their shepherds. The end.
That's probably what, when mine was talking about the two different chapters, like in that first 12 is focused on I, and the second is focused on him. Any thoughts? I'm always amazed at how many different ways it feels like there's 100 ways that they're like. I feel like when I pray, I like have like basic things I pray. Like I just feel like the Psalms, there's like so many different ways that they're expressing the same emotions.
Well, and it's up to us though too to get our eyes off of our circumstances and it goes so abruptly from 10 and 10, this is my fate that the blessings of God had changed to hate. And then in the very next sentence, I recall the many miracles he did for me so long ago. Those wonderful deeds are constantly in my thoughts. So it's just flipping the switch.
Yeah, I like to go through and just like highlight like all the I's, me's, my's, and then the yours, you. All right, Cindy, now for real this time, whenever you're ready.
Okay, overview verses 1 to 20. This psalm illustrates one cure for depression. The psalmist does not explain the cause of his despair, but he was definitely gloomy. When he thought about God, it only caused him to complain bitterly. But beginning in verse 10, the psalmist's mood starts to change because he commits himself to focusing on God's goodness and past acts of deliverance. His lament then changes into a hymn of praise. In three parts to this psalm, verses 1 to 9, the irritations of a depressed soul. Verses 10 to 15, the intention to refocus the mind. Verses 16 to 20, illustrations of God's past blessings. Verse 2, hand was stretched out. This was the posture for prayer. The psalmist prayed throughout the night. Verse 4, hold my eyelids open. The psalmist was so upset that he could neither sleep nor talk rationally. Verse 6, my song in the night. The remembrance of happier times only deepened his depression. The spirit makes diligent search. His spirit continually meditated on possible solutions to his problems. Verse 10, years of the right hand of the Most High. The psalmist began to remember the times when God used his right hand, meaning power, to strengthen and protect him. Verse 16, waters were afraid. A dramatic picture of God's parting the waters of the Red Sea. And there are references to Exodus. Verse 17, your arrows, a metaphor for lightning flashes. And that's it.
Kim, I had muted you. You'll have to unmute yourself. I thought there was background noise coming through, but it wasn't. Any thoughts on what she read?
I like that John MacArthur said there's a cure for depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wrote cure for depression, focus on God's goodness, not yourself. I think also though it helps like just taking the focus off yourself and even focusing on other people, helping other people. Because it's easy to spiral if you think about, oh, how miserable your life is. Even though we live in a first world country where we have shelter and food and freedom, kind of.
Well, I think my woe is me, a lot of it I bring on myself. Because I should be thankful for everything.
We deserve nothing. I like to, when he said, like in verse 10, like he started to remember the things that God had done. There's nothing else, Kathy, whenever you're ready.
This appears to be a companion psalm to 74, which also lamented the destruction of Jerusalem and the captivity of Israel. Both deal with the Lord's apparent rejection of his people, and both look for renewed hope back to the Exodus. When Jerusalem fell, many Jews were slain, and many were taken captive to Babylon. Asaph may have been in Jeremiah's circle and left behind to minister to the suffering remnant. And there's a reference to Jeremiah chapters 30 to 40. But Asaph himself was suffering as he lay in bed at night and wrestled with the meaning of terrible events he had witnessed. In this psalm, he described how he moved from disappointment and despair to confidence that the Lord would care for his people. The darkness of despair, verses 1 to 9. Unable to sleep, Asaph began by praying, then moved into remembering, and finally found himself questioning. In times of crisis and pain, prayer is the believer's natural response, and Asaph reached out his hands in the darkness and cried out to the Lord. He was God's servant and had led the people in worship in the temple, yet he found no comfort for his own heart. When he remembered the Lord and pondered the matter, he only groaned, for it seemed that the Lord had failed his people. But had he? Wasn't the Lord being faithful to his covenant and chastening Israel for their sins? Their very chastening was proof of his love. Asaph remembered the former years when Israel enjoyed God's blessing, and he also recalled the psalms he had sung at the temple, even when on duty at night. He had lifted his hands in the sanctuary and received the Lord's blessing, but now he lifted his hands and received nothing. It isn't a sin to question God, for both David and Jesus asked the Lord the same question, but it is a sin to demand an immediate answer or to suggest that God needs our counsel. Asaph asked 6 questions, all of which dealt with the very character and attributes of God. Has he rejected us? No. He is faithful to his word, reference to Lamentations 3:31 to 33. Will he ever again show favor to Israel? Yes. References to Psalms and Isaiah. Has his unfailing love vanished forever? No. Jeremiah 31:3. Have his promises failed? No. 1 Kings 8:56. Has he forgotten to be gracious? No. Isaiah 49:14 to 18. Is he so angry he has shut up his compassions? No. Lamentations 3:22 to 24. It has well been said that we should never doubt in the darkness what God has told us in the light, but Asaph was about to do so. No matter what his hand is doing in our lives, his heart has not changed. He still loves us and always will. The dawn of decision, verses 10 to 12. During the crisis experiences of life, there comes a time when we must get ourselves by the nape of the neck and shake ourselves out of pity into reality, and that's what Asaph did. The repeated "I will" indicates that he had come to a place of decision and determination. It is my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. That would be grief indeed if the character of God had altered. God has deserted his people, and this is a burden I must bear. He was wrong, of course, because the Lord doesn't change. And there are references to Numbers and 1 Samuel. But he was right in that by an act of will, he abandoned his former posture of doubt and determined to see the matter through, come what may. He decided to meditate on what God had done for Israel in the past and to learn from his deeds what he was intending for his people. The day of deliverance, verses 13 to 20. The pronouns suddenly changed from I and my to thee and thou, referring to the Lord. When we look at our circumstances, we focus on ourselves and see no hope. But when we look by faith to the Lord, our circumstances may not change, but we do. Asaph didn't completely solve his problems, but he did move out of the shadows of doubt into the sunshine of communion with the Lord and confidence in him. First, he looked up by faith and rejoiced in the greatness of God. He realized that God's ways are always holy, that he is a great God, and that his purposes are always right. Then Asaph looked back to Israel's exodus from Egypt for proof of the grace of and power of the Lord. Would God have barred his mighty arm to redeem Israel only for their destruction? Would God have bared his mighty arm to redeem Israel only for their destruction? No. These are the descendants of Jacob, whose 12 sons founded the 12 tribes of Israel. These are the brethren of Joseph, whom God sent to Egypt to preserve the nation. Why preserve them if he planned to destroy them? The Exodus account says nothing about a storm, although it does mention a strong wind. And there's a reference to Exodus 14:21. Some think that verses 17 to 18 refer to creation rather than to the Exodus, and creation does magnify God's power and glory. As believers, we look back to Calvary where the Lamb of God gave his life for us. If God the Father did not spare his own Son for us, will he not give us everything else that we need? There is a wonderful future for the people of God. Finally, Asaph realized afresh that the Lord was the shepherd of Israel. Just as he called Moses and Aaron and David to lead his flock, so he would appoint other shepherds in years to come. One day the good shepherd would come and give his life for his sheep. Asaph had some struggles during this difficult period in his life, but in the end, he knew he could trust the Lord to work out everything for good, and like an obedient sheep, he submitted to the shepherd. This is what we must do. The end.
Any thoughts before I go on to Tony Evans?
Well, I was thinking about when Kathy read, "It is a sin to counsel God." And then in those verses, there's a few verses when God wants the Israelites or a certain army to be defeated. And I think it's Moses that says, "But Lord, if they'll think these other people will think, you brought the Israelites all this way just to have them killed. Like, don't you think, we need a victory here?" Or they offered another suggestion. So it's confusing to me why those conversations occur in the Bible and God actually listens, to that counsel. However, they're stating that it's a sin to counsel.
Or even like Abraham when he bartered, or not bartered, but said, well, if there's 50. Were they counseling him though, or were they asking for mercy, like for the mercy?
Yeah, it's just I was thinking that too. I thought, well, I guess maybe God didn't consider that counsel. He was
like co-laboring or like conversation and friendship, but I would think Asaph would have been a friend too.
Or does God welcome these thought processes? It's not really counseling, it's working through our thoughts verbally, the thoughts of the situation verbally. God already, not that he really changed God's mind. Like the Bible didn't say, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. We'll do it your way. It was,
I was thinking
he was,
about that, Kim. I was thinking about that too, that, by us questioning, it doesn't necessarily maybe mean that we're trying to tell God what to do or what to change, but it's us working it through ourselves,
yeah.
our thinking.
Yeah,
I
because
don't
I
know. Like
remember reading that.
when it comes to your like say I was just thinking of like a situation where like I really cared for like say my grandchildren. Like if I saw them like going down a wrong path, which I'm sure some of you have experienced that, like that going before the Lord, like begging for mercy. I mean, like when Moses was going before those people, his entire life was wrapped up in those people.
Yeah.
Like he loved them so much that like he was just going before God and or he loved God so much that he was going before God and thinking like how it would ruin what God was trying to do.
Well, and it's just like adult children or teenagers. It gets to a point where all you can do is try to tell them, like, if you do this, this is going to happen, or you're hurting yourself, or blah blah blah. But
Mhm.
really, they have to make the decision.
Any other wisdom out there? No. All right. 77 Tony says 1 through 3. Seeking comfort in the midst of his trouble, Asaph reaches out to God. Oh, okay. Seeking comfort in the midst of his trouble. Asaph reaches out to God in prayer. He has faith that the Lord would hear him. Yet comfort eludes him because God has not yet responded. Thus, he is affected physically and spiritually. He groans and his spirit is weak. Notice, though, that Asaph continues to pursue God in his despair. 4 through 6. While waiting on God to answer, Asaph searches his own spirit for comfort. Because God kept him awake at night, he contemplates past times when he had experienced God's deliverance and sang in the night. He then ponders the fact that he had no current reason for praise given the nation's circumstances. 7 through 9. Asaph was confused because it seemed that God had rejected him and his people by removing from them his faithful love, covenantal promises, and graciousness. God's anger seemed to have replaced his compassion. 13 through 15. For comfort and assurance, Asaph turns to recalling and meditating on the holy God's deliverances in the past. Truly, there is no one like him. Verse 13. God is in a class by himself. He worked wonders and redeemed Israel with power. 16 through 20. Creation itself trembled when God acted for his people. When he rescued Israel from Egypt, he made a way through the sea and further demonstrated his power with storm clouds, thunder, lightning. God uses Moses and Aaron as instruments to lead and deliver his people like a flock of sheep. By recalling this great redemption of Israel by God's hand, Asaph encourages himself that God would again come to the aid of his people. He delayed his response. His delayed response does not mean abandonment. Thus, when God thus when God delays in answering our prayers, we need to remember how He cared for us in other times of distress. His footprints of grace from yesterday give us the power to trust Him today. I like that. His footprints of grace from yesterday give us the power to trust him today. The end. Any thoughts?
That last thing you read, Chrissy, can you say that slower?
Yes. The his footprints
Okay.
of his footprints of grace
Okay.
from yesterday tell me when you're ready.
Okay.
Give us the power
Okay.
to trust him today. His footprints of grace from yesterday give us the power to trust him today.
I do have to confess, whatever, that I've caught myself in the past few years looking back, even as far as when I was a kid, thinking, man, it was so much easier. And then I have to kind of get myself out of it.
Yeah, seasons of life. I always think it's interesting, like why God wouldn't give us the wisdom from when we were like give us wisdom that we have when we're older, when we're younger. Because I think the same thing, like you think before you have babies, life is hard, you don't have any time, and then you have the first baby and you're like, my goodness, what did I do with all my time? And then you have the second one and you're like, my goodness, what did I do with all that time? You know what I mean? Like,
There's a song phrase that says wisdom in your teens would be a lot less fun.
oh, this is true.
And then people wonder what you do with all your time when you're raising your children.
I do think, though, I mean, there's grace for Kathy. Not just your situation. I guess a lot of like healing, like it takes time.
Mhm.
One time, I don't even remember where I heard it, but someone said you don't forget, your life, things you go through in life becomes part of your DNA. It just gets tolerable, more tolerable. Any other thoughts? You ladies have a lot more wisdom out there than I do. All right. If there are no other pearls of
I was,
wisdom, go ahead.
I was just thinking of what Kathy said, and she said she had to admit or confess, that she wonders why things are so hard sometimes. But I mean, everything we read and all these books in the Bible over and over again, it's people lamenting over their circumstances in the moment. But you're here, Kathy. I mean, that's what counts. You're you're putting it before God and sitting at his feet every day. So even though God knows we're going to have our moments, but So did David, so did Paul, so did Moses,
Yeah,
Abraham.
and when you look at some of them, we don't have it rough at all.
Yeah, but they didn't know how easy we would have it. They
I actually feel like as easy as life is for us now, we would have been better off having their life. Was someone else going to say something?
Well, back then they had to scrap for everything just for daily life. They didn't, run up to the Piggly Wiggly or the Windham Dixie. They, forage and take care of their critters and
They didn't
raise
have
a family.
time. They didn't have
Top of it.
time to worry about. They had to just keep working.
Yep, and raise their family on top of doing all that.
But there are 15,000 wives and
Yes, that's what I was going to say. Solomon, and he's 700 wives and he's 300 concubines, but he
Well,
had babies,
they needed release from the pressure of life.
obviously. I'm talking about the shepherds and the goat herds and
Yeah.
people without Solomon's wealth.
Harper asked me Friday night. Now, this is from the mind of a 5-year-old. And it just made me realize like how much these kids think. We're getting ready to go to sleep. And she says, Grandma, is sin the the baddest thing that can happen to you? And I was going to sleep, so I had to think about that. But I thought I have to follow up with her on that because I said, well, sin's bad because but everybody sins, and then I thought, you know what? I just need to tell her, yes, it is because it separates you from God. But I thought, for her being 5 and thinking that deeply.
The thing of it is, well, if you think about it's sin isn't really something that happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't want her to think. I'd have to really think about that because I
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
want her
did
to
too.
think that somehow she would bring something upon herself. Like at this young age, she doesn't need to be fearful. That wouldn't, but we don't want to put fear, but I don't think it happens to you. I think maybe then rather than addressing the sin part of the question, just say God just wants to be with us all the time. And then that to help that prevent from happening or something like that,
Yeah.
about
Well, we
God's
talked
love
about
and his
Jesus
presence.
Jesus is the only one that doesn't have sin. But like thinking it through, like if we sin, if we do something that we know is wrong, that it creates separation between us and God. So that's why we try not to do things that are wrong. But we have to do it. We have to ask him for the strength to do that. Because I don't think
Yeah,
we're good.
then God's presence, I mean, if we ask continually just for his presence to be in every, if we can think that way, think
Mhm.
upon God, not upon the sin, like think upon him. And then he helps to prevent that sin from creeping in. I'd say the baddest thing that could ever happen is being separated from God.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really address the sin, just promote God.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you have to address the sin because the sin comes from within. Like that, and that it is going to happen, like, but in a way that a 5-year-old can understand it and not over complicate it for her. If she steals something, that is a sin. And in her heart, she would know that was wrong. And if she but that's coming from the desire within, and so overcoming.
It's
It
having
keeping it
God's
simple enough
presence,
for a 5-year-old.
just having God's presence and being aware of his presence as much as we possibly can, turning our thoughts and our hearts that way as often as you can helps prevent
Mm-hmm.
those bad decisions.
That obedience that we always talk about. All right, it's 10:30. Unmute for your trivia question. I think this one is a tough one. Maybe not for you guys. I didn't. I did not know until I read the answer what it was. Like I knew the answer once I read it. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Where was Elisha when God called him?
He was out plowing in the fields.
You're right. Plowing in a field. Florida gets it again. 1 Kings 19:19, if you need a refresher course on that one.
I had to try to get it in today before Rita comes back.
Good job, Julie.
Well, what was he plowing, Julie?
Well, he was plowing with oxen, I know.
In a field. Okay, this concludes the reading of God's word for today. Until tomorrow.
For sure.
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 All right, love you guys.